Vietnam is a country whose culture has been shaped by conflict and occupation. The country first gained its independence in the 10th century after around 1,000 years of Chinese rule. The influences of this occupation are still seen today, as similarities can be drawn with Vietnam's politics, government, and social norms. After a period of relative stability, Vietnam was invaded by the French, who seized control of several territories and much of Vietnam until the end of World War II. The advance of communism seeped into Vietnam following the Second World War, and despite intervention from the USA on the behalf of South Vietnam, the country was under communist rule until 1975, following the fall of Saigon. Current-day Vietnam remains as one of only 4 communist countries. This video will show how the history, geography, culture, and other influences have shaped the diet and eating habits of Vietnamese people both in their native country and overseas. Geographically, Vietnam is located in Southeast Asia and has an area of just over 330,000 square kilometers. It borders the countries of Laos, China, and Cambodia. The country has a population of approximately 90.3 million people, and the major ethnic group of the country is the Kin people, comprising of 86% of the population. The main religion in Vietnam is Buddhism, which is practiced by 85% of its citizens. The capital city of Vietnam is Hanoi in the north, with Ho Chi Minh City in the south being the former capital of South Vietnam. The climate of Vietnam varies from tropical in the south, with temperatures of up to 40 degrees, to monsoonal in the north, with occasional snow and frost in the northern mountains. The wet season is in between May and September, with the dry season being between October and March. The terrain of Vietnam varies depending on the part of the country. Around 3/4 of the country is mountainous, especially in the north and northwest. However, both the north and south have extensive delta regions. Despite this, around 16% of the total land area in Vietnam is used for agriculture. Economically, rapid growth during the 1990s helped to lift the financial status of Vietnam, and the country has a middle income rating, with a gross domestic product of $358.9 billion, almost $4,000 per capita, which gives the country the rank of 40th worldwide. The unemployment rate is around 1.3%, however around 11% of the population live below the poverty line. Vietnam joined the World Trade Organization in 2007, and its wealth is the second most evenly distributed of all the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, behind Indonesia. The country's main agricultural productions are rice, beans, coffee, and seafood, and the industry in the country is mostly food processing, textiles, and mining. Despite Western influence and globalization having an effect on the economy of Vietnam, most holidays and traditions are firmly rooted in the local cultures and history. Only small numbers of Western-influenced Vietnamese celebrate occasions such as Christmas or birthdays. The 2 most important cultural holidays in the country are Tet, the New Year celebration, and Tet Trung Thu, the autumn harvest. Migration of Vietnamese people to Australia was a rare occurrence until 1975, when the fall of Saigon and subsequent reform of the south of Vietnam into a communist country forced many people to flee the country and seek refuge overseas. This prompted a change in Australian immigration law to allow the Vietnamese to settle in the country. This situation became a heavy political and cultural talking point of the time, which was emphasised by a global anti-war movement in Western countries. The issue became a trigger for an end to White Australia policy in the 1970s, and was also used as a trigger to end bipartisanship on multiculturalism in the 1980s. Before 1975, there were less than 1,000 Vietnamese citizens in Australia, composed mostly of students and government officials. In the 2 decades following, over 100,000 Vietnamese people had migrated to Australia. The latest census data from 2011 show that there are now around 185,000 people born in Vietnam living in Australia.
Tropical lowlands and densely forest highlands cover almost 80% of Vietnam. Due to this, the majority of Vietnam's agriculture and urban development is concentrated within 2 main areas, the Red River Delta of the north and the Mekong Delta of the south. Vietnamese culture, cuisine and climate can be divided into 3 distinct areas, the cool north, the central highlands and the hot south. China has been a significant influence on northern Vietnamese food and cuisine, as Vietnam was a tributary state to its large neighbour China for around 2,000 years. The influence that China has had on Vietnamese cuisine is evident within simple stir-fries and rice dishes which are prevalent throughout Vietnam. The hot and fertile lowlands of southern Vietnam are known for its abundance of fresh vegetables, fruit and fish. France has also had a massive impact on food culture within Vietnam. Southern Vietnam was conquered by France in 1859 and remained under the French until 1945. Today, aspects of French cuisine are embedded within Vietnamese food through various ingredients and flavours. For instance, the Vietnamese have adopted and modified the baguette by creating their own version using rice flour. Bread and pastries can be found throughout Vietnam. The most common religion within Vietnam is Buddhism, and the most devoted Buddhists within Vietnam are vegetarian. Tet is the most sacred cultural Vietnamese holiday and marks the Lunar New Year. Banh cakes are known as the traditional Tet food and consist of sticky rice, pork and beans and are wrapped in green arrowroot leaves. Rice is the most prevalent food group within Vietnam and will be present in some form at every meal, including breakfast. Jasmine rice is the most common choice of rice. Currently, 60% of the arable land within Vietnam is dedicated to growing rice. Overall, Vietnam currently ranks 5th globally for the consumption of rice and 3rd for the exporter of grain. Rice has also been transformed into various types of noodles such as vermicelli, bun con and bun pho. Within the highlands of northern and western Vietnam, where the weather is typically cooler, glutinous rice can be found, which is also known as sticky rice, which is regularly added to savoury dishes as well as sweets and desserts. The Vietnamese culture emerged along riverbanks and waterways and has over 3,000 kilometres of coastline. Therefore, fish and shellfish are also vital aspects of the Vietnamese cuisine. Within rural Vietnamese communities, eels, catfish and shrimp are all common in everyday meals. The most dominant meat within Vietnam is pork, however beef and chicken are also popular choices. It is estimated that 98% of Vietnamese households consume pork and is around 75% of the meat eaten by Vietnamese people. Raw vegetables are regularly eaten within the Vietnamese diet. For instance, wrapping lettuce around food or green vegetable salads. In addition to this, cooked green vegetables such as water spinach often accompany savoury meals. Green fresh vegetables are added to meals to add colour and fragrance. The majority of Vietnamese recipes include a variety of herbs, spices and vegetables in order to promote good health. Common spices include lemongrass, chili sauce, soy sauce, coriander, mint leaves and ginger. In addition to this, fish sauce, black pepper, sugar, coconut milk, basil and garlic are also added to create more flavour. Chopsticks are used by the majority of Vietnamese population. As rice is served at most meals, a large communal bowl of rice is placed at the centre of the table. Each individual is given a smaller bowl in which they will then proceed to transfer rice from the communal bowl to his or her individual bowl. The basic structure of a Vietnamese meal would consist of steamed rice and a variety of side dishes. The following provides an example of what a normal day of eating looks like in Vietnam. For breakfast, pho noodle soup with beef or chicken, or porridge. Morning tea, fruit skewers or sticky rice pudding. For lunch, rice vermicelli salad with pork or chicken, or Vietnamese chicken salad with steamed rice. For dinner, a serving of rice, a serving of stir fry with chayote, melon, angle squash, long beans and taro stems, and boiled water spinach. A small side salad consisting of lettuce, carrot, cabbage and aromatic leaves. Long-jawed anchovy or pork is wrapped in rice paper rolls with fresh herbs. For dessert, banana soup, sticky rice cakes or pastries, and drinks usually consist of tea.
The Vietnamese diet is centered around plain rice. Some variety of rice is a part of every meal. There are many different uses for rice in Vietnamese cuisine. It can be turned into rice wine, rice vinegar, rice noodles, and rice paper for wrapping spring rolls. For Vietnamese adults, all 3 meals consumed in the day may consist of some sort of rice accompanied by a side of assorted vegetables and/or meats. Another very common ingredient in most Vietnamese dishes is ngoc mum, which is a dipping sauce made from fermented salt and anchovies. However, it can be expensive for the higher quality varieties. The lower quality ngoc mum is used in cooking. A simple dish of steamed rice with a spoonful of ngoc mum is considered to be an authentic Vietnamese peasant meal. However, ngoc mum is very hard to find in Australia. An alternative is just using salt if they cannot acquire it. Some Vietnamese instead use a mixture of soy and oyster sauce as a replacement for ngoc mum. It is a suitable and cheap alternative when ngoc mum is not readily available. Pho bo, or beef noodle soup, is the signature dish of Vietnamese cuisine. It is regularly eaten for breakfast after being purchased from street vendors on the way to work or school. However, with growing acculturation, they have begun to eat breakfasts such as oatmeal or baguettes. This stems from the French influence when Vietnam was a colony of France from 1858 to 1954. Other foods that were introduced by France were foods such as butter, milk, custard, and cakes. Lunch may normally consist of banh mi, which is a sandwich with carrot, cilantro, or coriander as we know it, onions, and daikon, with some variety of meat on a roll. Again, this stems from the influence of France. Daikon is a form of radish and is not commonly found at the grocery stores in Australia. However, red radishes are often used as an equivalent. Other meals include rice vermicelli or meat and vegetables wrapped in thin rice paper wrappers. Dinner the majority of the time is rice and soup, accompanied by steamed or stir-fried dishes containing assortments of meat and vegetables. These dishes are not just a single meal, but a large dish shared amongst the family. Sweet fruits and ice cream are now common between meals as snacks. This was introduced in the Vietnam War era during the 1960s and 70s. This was due to the US military, who had ice cream factories built in the country. As the majority of the Vietnamese diet is rice, meat, and vegetables, they are mostly available within Australia. This means that Vietnamese people within our country are able to follow the same diet that they would normally have in their home country. Vietnamese people outside of their country are likely to have an increase in weight, cholesterol, and risk of diabetes. There are many factors that influence this increase. Some include the change of food eaten, and others concern the quantities eaten. For example, pork and chicken are much cheaper and more readily available here than they are in Vietnam, and they therefore increase their meat consumption. Many Vietnamese believe that meat is more nutritious than other foods, and do not believe that their regular diet of vegetables and fish is nutritious. For snacks and dessert, the Vietnamese consume large amounts of sugar and saturated fats. These fats are contained within coconut oil and coconut milk, regularly used in Vietnamese cooking. Due to the Vietnamese reliance on yok nam, which they tend to consume with most meals, their diet is also quite high in sodium. However, the Vietnamese diet is not that dissimilar to the diet prescribed by the Australian Guidelines of Healthy Eating. They would consume roughly the same amount of vegetables, meats, and grains, but would eat increased amounts of fruit and non-essential food choices. The largest disparity in the two diets is in the dairy category, as milk, cheese, and butter are not regularly consumed in the Vietnamese diet, which opts for coconut milk that is higher in saturated fats.
I left my heart to disciples round K-San, and my soul was sold with my cigarettes to the black market man. I had the Vietnam cold turkey from the ocean to